Here is the current issue of New Yorker magazine, and it's got President Obama there with our new government care written by the insurance companies posing as liberal. Again, things are not even what they seem, even if you're for socialist health care. This is not that. And it says, the mosquito solution. Can genetic modification eliminate a deadly tropical disease? Now, so many of these diseases came from government research laboratories like what we now know of as Lyme disease, really just weaponized tick-borne syphilis out of Plum Island. Environmentalists have expressed concern about what might happen if some of the modified females survived and began biting people, and it goes on. Well, here's the problem. I have articles where they admit that some of the females are going to end up living. I'm going to show you that in a moment. But it goes on, survived, and biting people infected them with an engineered protein. And it goes on from that point. But then I wanted to show you some background before we go to Jenna Reed, a researcher at foodandwaterwatch.org. It's on the front lines of following this because they're set to release it without a permit. You got to get a permit to cut a tree in many areas of Florida or other parts of the country. This is in Florida where this is about to happen. Or to build a shed on your property or to string some lights. But you want to release huge clouds of GMO insects, mosquitoes, which, by the way, they say some of them will live. That's A-OK. And will bite humans. Here's the New York Times, October 30, 2011. Concerns are raised about genetically engineered mosquitoes. And then later in the article, it says the first release was discussed in a scientific paper published online on Sunday by the Journal of Nature Biotechnology. Took place in Cayman Islands in the Caribbean in 2009 and caught the international scientific community by surprise. It goes on to say the company has subsequently released the modified mosquitoes in Malaysia and Brazil, and they still go on in the article to, well, here it is. Alfred M. Handler, a geneticist at the Agriculture Department in Gainesville, Florida, said the mosquito was being bred for generations in the lab, can evolve resistance to the lethal gene, and might then be released inadvertently. Todd Shelley, an entomologist at the Agriculture Department in Hawaii, said the commentary published Sunday by the Nature Biotechnology that 3.5% of the insects in the lab test survived to adulthood despite presumably carrying the lethal gene, which is a self-destruct system, which could get into humans, folks. Oh, but the elite are obsessed with reducing our population and putting self-destruct genes into us, but these are just mosquitoes that bite us, and they admit it could mutate. But Bill Gates just says he wants to get rid of us, but it's all right. Never mind that. Everything's fine. Did I tell you how scary Al-Qaeda is? Give up your rights. They might get you. Might be underneath the table. Also, the sorting of female and male mosquitoes, which is done by hand, can result in up to 0.5% of the released insects being female so they can breed. The commentary said if millions of mosquitoes were released, even the small percentage of females could lead to temporary increase in disease spread. Yeah, the females are the ones that drink the blood. Male mosquitoes don't in any species. They need the protein to produce their larvae. That's what you see swimming around in the water. Little squiggly things. That's the larvae. So there you go, spreading the disease. Oh, and it wasn't just Merck. We had the GlaxoSmithKline, knowingly with all these drugs, knowing that their asthma drug that made them tens of billions that was released 2 years ago was killing people. They knew it made asthma worse and was killing people, including children. But don't worry, they can make 20, 30 billion and get $1 billion fine. Slap on the wrist, license to kill. But don't worry, they're moving on to GMO milk. They're moving on to GMO mosquitoes. They're moving on to GMO everything. It doesn't matter if all the studies show that just the old line GMO is causing the honeybees to die and causing the, guys, just type in, people won't believe it, just type in, study shows GMO crops causing organ failure, sterility in lab animals. You'll get Associated Press, Reuters. Organ failure. I've had scientists on that by the third generation with rats and guinea pigs, 99% were born sterile or dead. They have guinea pigs with hair growing out of their mouths. But again, we shouldn't be concerned about that. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Bayer knowingly for 11 years shipped out tainted blood that they knew had hepatitis and HIV, a death sentence to hundreds of thousands of hemophiliacs, and no one got in trouble. They paid a small fine, but France said, you know what, we're going to arrest Bayer officials, and they at least arrested them, and some did jail time. So cold-blooded. It's not just about profit. They're eugenicists, but I'm ranting. I wanted to give you background on this so you would understand that they admit that A, they'll live, B, they'll spread it, and that C, there's a good chance they're going to transmit a protein into you that causes sterility. This is the way to get rid of mosquitoes is to supposedly, you make it where they can't spread different diseases, is to sterilize them. Oh, and this could get into us. Does that sound like a good idea? You think 20-year-old GMO corn is causing all sorts of allergy problems? Imagine. Again, I'm ranting. Now, somebody who has been following this very, very closely, and here's some of the articles, mosquito tests could occur without permit. That just came out a few months ago. Here's another one from Food and Water Watch.org. Group calls on governor to protect Floridians and block release of unregulated, risky GE, genetically engineered mosquitoes. And the lady heading up the fight against this is investigator, researcher, Jenna Reed. This is about to happen, so we need to have action on this, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm right here in Texas. The mosquitoes from Florida make their way here through Louisiana, Mississippi, Louisiana, and then finally here. This is going to affect everybody, just like those ticks that got released from Plum Island, biological weapons system, got out into the United States. So she joins us now, Jenna Reed, to break down Food and Water Watch.org's analysis of this. Jenna, thank you so much for coming on with us. You heard my little breakdown there. You've got the floor. What is this? What are they doing? What do we face? How do we stop it?
All right. So what we're facing here is the company Oxitec is an English company, and they've designed this technology, basically, as you've said, to eradicate dengue fever in several tropical areas where it has been prevalent recently. And the reason that they have decided to come to America as their next spot is the Florida Keys actually had their first cases of dengue fever in about 70 years in 2009. They had over 60 cases, and then 2010 they had over 30. However, in 2011 there were no cases, and there have been none so far in 2012. But they still want to do a field trial of these genetically engineered mosquitoes in the Florida Keys at some point soon. Now, their biggest hurdle that they've faced is that there really is no clear regulatory path. The federal government, when we first got word of this, I called up FDA, I called up EPA, I called up USDA. I got a lot of responses we don't have jurisdiction over this, USDA specifically, and then I had to put in a Freedom of Information Act request, a FOIA request, into the FDA to get some further information about whether they actually have any jurisdiction, whether they can actually regulate these insects somehow. I mean, or are we potentially releasing these insects into the wild, and then there's no one that can be held responsible for this. So we have received word that from outside sources, FDA really has never confirmed this, but that there is investigational new animal drug application for these mosquitoes. So basically, mosquitoes are being regulated as an animal drug, which is exactly what has been happening with genetically engineered salmon recently, which you mentioned earlier too. So this is a big problem. I mean, we're squeezing genetically engineered animals into a regulatory structure that is really not designed to handle them. USDA at least has a process for genetically engineered crops, but there really is no pathway for genetically engineered animals, such as insects. So that's what we're facing now.
Well, it sounds like a bad science fiction movie where there's all these hundreds of companies creating GMO fish, plants, insects, and hey, let's just release them And then you've got Bill Gates at weird TED TV conferences. Have you seen that footage where he doesn't tell the crowd, he just releases mosquitoes on them?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Guys, see if you can pull that up later, because I want to show her. I know it sounds crazy. I'm not kidding, Jenna. I'll play that here for you in a moment if they can find it. But my issue is reading the literature. They admit that A, some of the mosquitoes could survive. B, they could bite people. Maybe they would pass on this protein that could cause Lord knows what. I mean, we're already seeing autoimmune diseases just rocket straight up. Neurological disorders, cancers, and so much of it has been linked to GMO. I mean, Monsanto says they've got a code of total ethics, but I covered earlier articles where for 12 years at their cafeterias, their GMO scientists will not eat GMO. Were you familiar with that?
No, I haven't heard that one.
I mean, why do you think they might not want to eat their own food? I mean, we know that Monsanto gave us Agent Orange, dioxin, all these other wonderful things, but they promise us that their BT crops that pharmacologically grow their own toxins so that bugs can't eat them, but then it's fine for us to eat it. I mean, wait, a bug can't eat it, but I can eat it. I mean, again, I'm not a rocket scientist, not a brain surgeon, not a quantum physics, mechanic or anything. Bugs die when they eat it, but it's good for me. And then we're eating it and all these disorders are exploding and gut disorders and things. I don't know. Does that sound good to you?
It doesn't. And one of the things and one of the major issues in this whole, problem is that the reason that somehow we're assured that all of these crops and food items are actually safe is because the people that are telling us that we're safe are the ones actually conducting these safety studies. And any independent scientists that do try to do this research are either they have a tough time finding funding for it, or they're aren't actually able to get a hold of the product to do the testing on because the companies have it patented and have such a hold on that actual technology.
That's right. They claim patent, copyright, and trademark. So it's like, hey, we tested it ourselves. We say it's safe, and you're not allowed to look at what's going on here. But we're going to release some mosquitoes on you. It's not a big deal. Just trust us, everything. You know what? I'm not going to be a conspiracy theorist here because being a conspiracy theorist means asking questions. I'm going to say I think you're bad, and I think it's a good idea that they release these mosquitoes. How dare anyone not want this to happen?
That is what we hear a lot. The thing is, the major issue we have with the what has been happening with these releases, especially with Oxitec, the company that has made them as a product, is that they're really not handling it well within the community. They're either not being completely transparent about the process. Oxitec actually has called the insects sterile instead of genetically engineered, which is what they are. So people, don't necessarily know in these communities what they're facing. And then, the public doesn't generally know what's happening, which is a real problem. And the communities that do know what's going on, like in the Florida Keys, for example, most of them are pretty, opposed to the idea. And actually in the Keys in April, the Key West City Commission introduced a resolution in opposition of this release of genetically engineered mosquitoes, and they voted 5-2 in opposition.
Well, they're just being extremist. Come on. No, but getting back on a serious note, so opposition is building. When is the company planning to go ahead with this? Because, it looks, what's the time frames we're looking at here?
Yeah, the time frame has been changing a lot. It originally was intended for spring 2012, but as we know, this has passed, and that's a good sign because they actually, right now is such a peak in mosquito populations that to actually introduce these mosquitoes at a ratio of 10-1, which is what they would have to release it at in order to actually, conquer the wild population, is really a tough task to do at the height of the season, like in the summertime. So their goal was to do it in the early spring, and because they've missed it it might be a while before they would actually be able to release